Do you remember the time when Jason Todd was a tentacle monster for about one issue? It really was a brief moment, yet it even spawned a name online, Tentatodd. Although it was a blip, it was an interesting time, and we're going to take a look back at it here on Casually Comics. I'm Sasha, and let's take a look at just how Tentatodd came about and why. Jason Todd, the second Robin, has had an interesting struggle since he returned to life. The character was killed back in 1988 in Batman 428, but decades later in the early 2000s would find himself resurrected. The question then became what to do with the character long term. What was his place in the DC universe? Very early on, one of the ideas was that he could replace Dick Grayson as Nightwing. This because for a time, Dick Grayson was slated to die. He was supposed to die in the event Infinite Crisis. Infinite Crisis was a 2005-2006 event that saw the return of the multiverse, which had been folded into one universe back in 1985's Crisis on Infinite Earths. So Infinite Crisis was essentially a sequel. And then that event was followed by a couple, and one such was in the main comic something called 1 Year Later. This event saw the comics jumping forward a year. That way they could have a new status quo and things would be different since Infinite Crisis. And then those events would either be filled in at the end of Infinite Crisis or during the 52 event. Not the new 52. 52. DC loves number 52. Now, it had been known for some time that then DC Comics co-publisher Dan Didio wanted to kill off both Wally West as the Flash and Dick Grayson as Nightwing. Fans have long speculated as to why this is, oftentimes based on his own words. Discussions about superheroes' effectiveness and how they can't be happy, there's a whole thing there. So this led to the idea that Didio just had a problem with legacy characters in general, and specifically Nightwing, that he didn't understand Nightwing's function as a character. We're gonna have a couple of quotes here, one that shows how fans have come to that conclusion, and one that shows Didio's stance, which is that this was a narrative decision. He stated, by putting him, Nightwing, in that role that if he died, he would bring Superman and Batman together again and unite our heroes against the great threat. I think that's a noble death, and I think that's something that had value. Same type of death happened in Crisis on Infinite Earths. You want to have that level of importance. I felt the death of one of the characters that touched them all in a way was going to be the perfect way to do that. Dick Grayson was that character. That's a very interesting statement because that's not why Supergirl died in Crisis on Infinite Earths if we're talking about Supergirl being the death. She died because they decided that they were resetting Superman and there were too many Kryptonians. Was it Barry's death? Either way, one could read this quote and see it from an angle where it has respect for Dick Grayson, what the character means to the DC universe and as a character. However, that's not the only quote about Nightwing making the rounds. Here's another one, also by Didio. The reason that I hate Nightwing is that he's getting older. The reason people like Nightwing because he aged with them, but Batman can't get older. It's an interesting discussion to have about what the feelings surrounding Nightwing were. Now, his death ultimately did not happen, but when it had been in the cards, one of the things that was set to happen was that Jason Todd was going to take over the mantle. How that would have gone, we'll never know. We don't live in that timeline, but we do live in the one where the leftover vestiges of that plot were worked out in the Nightwing 1 Year Later storyline, Brothers in Blood, which spanned Nightwing 118 to 124. Even though for our purposes, we only need up to 122. This because Jason pieces out at that point, but the rest of the plot and the Pierce brothers, the villains they were dealing with, need to be wrapped up in those last two. This story starts with Jason having taken over Nightwing's mantle and ends with him being mutated into a tentacle monster. It's a journey, and you have to wait for the tentacle monster. It's your reward. The story was written by Bruce Jones with art by Joe Dodd. Then Paco Diaz from 120 on. Inks by Bit with an assist by Nathan Mazengill for issues 121 and 120. I don't know why I said those numbers backwards. And colors by Javier Rodriguez, except issue 122, that was Guy Major. Admittedly, the art in this is going to be pretty wobbly at points. In terms of perspective and panel arrangement, it can even get a bit chaotic, or a bit difficult to follow. There are moments where key details are a bit lost in a story like this where you have two characters who are in the same costume and look so similar, that can really throw you off. One of the main differences between Jason and Dick is their hair length, and that sometimes can be hard to see. And sometimes some of the details like his belt and stuff, they fade into the background. There's one character who's introduced in this who within the same issue, her hair color changes. And it's just for a little bit, but I thought it was a different character because of that until they said her name. Now, Jason and Dick have different color narration boxes to help separate them. Jason's are of course red and Dick's are blue. So we open with Jason already operating as Nightwing. He's saving a girl from kidnappers, but murdering would-be kidnappers in the process. Cat got your tongue, wise guy? Or you got something stuck in your throat? The gang's all here! Dick's back in New York. He's getting back into the swing of things. He's having one-night stands and establishing himself as player Dick Grayson, but he's not thrilled when he learns that there's an imposter Nightwing running around, ruining his rep, besmirching his good name by killing people. So he takes to the streets as Nightwing to find out what's going on, and also to get back into the vigilante game. By the end of the first issue, he quickly learns that his imposter is Jason. This after he falls off the roof while battling the Pierce brothers, who are these meta mafiosos who are moving in on New York. The differences in costume are so minor, designer, Dick has a belt and some 90s gauntleting and leg holster action, but when they're rendered without much detail, those things can get lost. Gloating in front of the guy who just saved your life? Jason, what the hell are you doing in that costume? Nightwinging, obviously. Somebody had to. Where the hell you been for the last year, partner? Do you notice how the line of action just shifted? Disorienting. Not pretending to be the Red Hood, that's for sure. Got tired of the outfit. Now Jason says he wasn't trying to take Dick's place, even though he totally was, and if he wasn't, it's not established just what he was doing. He does this while calling him Dickster, which does amuse me. And he offers him what he views as the sweet deal of going 50-50. 2 Nightwings. Although it's not framed as if some nights one will be Nightwing and some the other will be Nightwing, but that they'll just both be Nightwing. Is that 50-50? Or is that just 2 Nightwings? Because he also doesn't say they'll divide up the city or anything. I think this is just 2 Nightwings, not 50-50, Jason. Can you see the headlines? Double threat. Criminals beware, the Nightwingers are in town. Okay, the name needs work. Dick refuses, so Jason says it's on. May the best Nightwing win. And also, he's gonna try and steal the girl that Dick slept with at the beginning of the first issue. Cause why not? Or he's just vaguely threatening her. Jason does what Jason does in this story. Dick's plot is a bit of a mess in this. He becomes the accidental model because of the woman, Cheyenne Fremont, who he slept with. She turns out to be a hot fashion designer, who's also quasi-dating one of the Pierce brothers. He's a shareholder in her company. Also, she's a secret meta. Jason does meet her, and it's implied she picks him up for a one-night stand, because she asks for no last names, just like she did with Dick. But nothing seemingly comes of it, except he ends up as a guest at her upcoming fashion show, which she turns into a Nightwing-themed show with other superhero costumes, because superheroes are in the public eye because of Nightwing being in the papers for killing people. So she wants to cash in on all that murderous Nightwing coverage. Now, while that is tasteless, I cannot believe that she is the first fashion designer in universe to try a stunt like this, be it around heroes or villains. So Dick finds out that Jason is impersonating him in issue 118. May the best man win is issue 119. The first hint of tentacles being involved in any way is the cover of issue 120. The Pierce brothers want Nightwing dealt with. He's messing with their operations. But they now know that there are 2 of them. So what to do and which one is the real Nightwing? They hire a meta-human mercenary named Jacob. This is his first appearance. If you don't recognize him, don't worry. He's there to deal with this, and he's a meta with some light psychic abilities, or is also just very perceptive, because he's able to review a videotape of the 2 Nightwings fighting while they're trying to stop a heist that was going on, and he's just able to instantly zero in on which one is the real Nightwing. That one. Right there. Zoom in, enhance. He's also able to determine that Jason Nightwing has issues with Dick Nightwing. Not that he knows who either of them are, but he's able to tell that, whoa, there's history there. The foe Nightwing identifies in some way with his counterpart. Why? Many reasons. Perhaps we all experienced some form of hero worship growing up. Kind of already grown, wouldn't you say? Some of us take longer than others. Nightwing's been trying to figure out just why Jason is impersonating him, and so he's been talking to this woman about it. She's a psychiatrist, not just some random woman that Dick is talking to. You mean you're deliberately letting him get away? I didn't say that. Is that what you think? Let me ask you this. Were you ready to be Nightwing again before this Jason of yours showed up? Why are you giving away his real name like that? That's not cool, Dick. Because it's what you think that's important. Were you happier when you didn't have to wear that suit? Maybe with Jason on the scene, you've subconsciously considered, well, retiring. Or, hello? Nightwing? I'm sorry, did I hit a nerve? This story is a bit of a hodgepodge. Part of what's happening here is that this is meant to be 1 year later, but because of that, there's some key information missing that would make some of the emotional notes they're trying to pull in the story work. There's never any indication that Dick didn't want to be Nightwing. We jumped in with him having a one-night stand and then looking around trying to find an apartment, and by that point, he had already seen that there was an imposter who had taken over his role and he was upset about it. The question about whether he's holding back with Jason is interesting, but they don't really deal with it. The answer is yes, though. Yes, he is. But be that as it may, this Jacob knows that if they get faux Nightwing, this will get real Nightwing to look for him. And he gets his opportunity later that issue. But not before some more fashion-related shenanigans. Dick's been made to wear a Nightwing costume for Cheyenne's fashion show. And while he's walking the runway, he sees Jason in the audience, and Dick just attacks him in public like an unhinged maniac. And now, a special surprise, a stunning homage to New York's newest sensation. Running away would have looked weird. Pitching a fit would have looked weird. I need to stay close to Cheyenne. This is still a bad idea. Shay, they're not going for it. I told you this was a mistake. Easy, Rebecca. Let them digest it. That guy next to Cheyenne, is that Jason? Whoa, talk about coming out. Bravo, bravo, excelente, bravissimo. He thinks he can push my buttons. It's time to prove he's not the only one who can take someone by surprise. Why, Dickie Bird, fancy meeting you here. I can't keep letting him play me like this. Stay away from Cheyenne, Todd. You don't have to be jealous, partner. What is Jason doing in this last panel? Jumping, being punched. In the next panel, he's grabbed onto the chandelier. It's just an awkward flow of action. It can be off-putting. In general, in this, a lot of the action looks stilted and doesn't fully flow. It's not as dynamic as it could be. Look at them clapping in the back. They play the whole the audience thinks this is part of the show. Sure, Jan. Even if they do, not only is Cheyenne getting sued because somebody probably got hurt and hit by flying debris, but what a risk for Dick to take to just flip out in costume like this. You wouldn't take a chance like this if this was actually your secret identity. You don't want to plant that seed in people's heads. Jason gets away by threatening Dick's friends, saying he'll call his contacts, even though he hasn't been shown to be working with anybody. And then he calls Dick later that night to come and meet him so they can stop a jewelry heist together. And it's then he's captured by Jacob, who eats him because he is some kind of transforming giant mutant monster thing. Issue 121. We have a bit of an opening sequence showing that Jason is obsessed in some way with Dick. He's latched onto him as a comfort since coming back to life, or seemingly has. They don't fully go into it. But this seems to be part of the explanation for why he's adopted this persona. I don't like this. Nuh-uh, no names please. He doesn't know who I am yet. I just as soon keep it that way. I'm scared. I don't like this at all. Tough bounce, kiddo. Got a feeling it's gonna get a lot worse. They have the same voice there because it's just him talking to himself in his head. Jason gets vomited out with some kind of chrysalis, and there's a time limit. It'll harden within 24 hours and he'll run out of oxygen. He can breathe in there somehow, even though it's liquid, just go with it. They've got to get Nightwing to come and save other Nightwing, because they're connected somehow, because this meta told them so. When did they have time to get these posters made? Dick and Cheyenne, who is during this time decided to be Lady Nightwing, just go with it. They decide to break in and save Jason and take on the Pierce brothers, which brings us to 122. Cheyenne is able to bust Jason out of his cocoon thing by tricking the meta Pierce brother with super dense molecules into punching it, and somehow, because Jason drank the Jacob juice, he's absorbed the ability to temporarily transform into a tentacle monster. And it's gross. See? Told you would make an aces team. Stop me if I missed a plot point here, but aren't you the meta clown who sicked the cockroach on me? You sent me down the gullet of that giant insectoid psychopath. Looks like I got a little surprise out of the bargain. And now it's your turn. God! This image haunts my dreams. The little mop of hair on top makes it round the corner from grotesque to hilarious for me. Don't think I ingested enough juice to stay bugged out like this forever. But for now, it's kind of cozy, don't you think, Berry Boy? Jason can't keep the villain that he swallowed down because he's trying to implode inside of him and then he would explode. That's what happened to Jacob, by the way. He swallowed Cheyenne and then she used her powers on him, her electric powers, and he exploded. It's been a gross issue. And so Jason pukes him back up. Excuse me. That was the single most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Jason ends up latching onto one of the Pierce brothers who is gearing up to explode. So Dick leaves him in there with this villain and says he'll have to take care of himself while he flees with Lady Nightwing. And then the building explodes, but they did manage to evacuate some people. They were fighting on top of a strip club, because of course they were. But how do you end this tale of two Nightwings and Tentatodd? Why, off panel with a note, of course. Oh, it's for you, all right. Dear Dickie Bird, stop. I survived and I'm all back to normal, in case you're interested. Stop. Leaving town to find my own way. Thanks for coming for me, brother. Stop. I know we don't agree on much. Stop. I just wanted to believe we could be family again. Stop. P.S. Glad to hear Shay's giving up the costumed life. Stop. But I love the way she looks in that costume. Stop. Especially the snug little top. Please stop. And then they never spoke of it again. In canon, because periodically it pops up online, because it is an odd little outing. If you read it, there is some imagery that has the potential to stick with you. This is a filler story. It was the end of one author's run on the book, Dick Grayson, and in between the start of another run while they tried to figure out what to do with Nightwing. The next storyline was going to be by Marv Wolfman. There's a need to reorient the character, not only because he wasn't going to be around, but also because they have the whole 1 year later, so they need to do some kind of shift to the status quo. However, this story is a bit of a mess. And the way it wraps up just comes out of nowhere. Of all the ways to get Jason Todd out of the picture, Tentacle Monster is certainly a choice. It also doesn't really deal with anything since it was temporary. There's not a reason for him to really stop being Nightwing. None of that was really dealt with in the whole may the best Nightwing win thing. It didn't really go anywhere. The note might as well read, well, the editors told me to wrap it up, so I'm leaving. Bye. P.S. We're not doing this plot anymore. Peace out. And yet the imagery is so visceral, the plot so random, that it's hard to forget Tentatodd happened if you're a fan of odd comic book plots. It was one One issue, but what an issue. One that will live on forever in the hallowed halls of the but why though wing of comicdom. Now, the plot of Dick returning to the city to find himself replaced by his newly revived brother could actually have really worked. It had tons of potential. There's a lot that could have been done here with Jason and Dick's relationship, even salvaging some of the Dick was supposed to die plot and having it that he seemingly died. The idea that maybe thinking his brother was dead, coupled with the instability of coming back to life, had made Jason do this as a kind of twisted homage. And you could have had that built-in drama because when Dick returns, these actions would push the two even further apart, even though neither one really wants that. This story does flirt with some of those concepts, like they bring up the fact that Dick killed Blockbuster and Jason not understanding why there's such a separation between them anymore. Another thing that's not addressed is what about the varied public opinions on Nightwing? They mention it briefly because of the fashion show, but it's not clear if it's overwhelmingly negative or positive. Jason says it's positive, but he's obviously biased. Something could have been done with that. Maybe having Dick question his methods if people were into the idea of a Nightwing who kills, or could have forced him to confront his own trauma since he himself has killed and maybe question Batman's teachings. You know, or he could become an accidental model and you could dress him in a kind of caveman costume. It could have been cool to see just why Dick is a better Nightwing than Jason, and even end with Jason still leaving to find himself. But then the world wouldn't have had Tentatodd, and what a sadder place that would— no, it would have been fine. The world doesn't really need Tentatodd. It's fun, but the world could have lived without blob/tentacle monster Jason. There are so many other tentacle monsters out there. It's not just the Jason Todd versus Dick Grayson plot that feels a bit mishandled, but as is the entirety of the Cheyenne Fremont becoming and then deciding not to be Nightwing plot. As you can see via that note, it's also just very much brushed off. And that plot took up a decent amount of time in this run. Let me know if you want to hear more about her in that. The story is so fragmented that you can look at those portions entirely separately from the Jason Todd portions. You could actually cut the two of them meeting entirely and it wouldn't matter until the end when they have to go save him, and even then it could just be her teaming up with Dick to help him. Her knowing Jason didn't really do anything. He didn't even need to know her to end up at the fashion show because it's never really established what Jason is doing in town while he's Jason. At least not in this story. As it stands, Brothers in Blood is an odd blip in Nightwing's history for all characters involved. It's a story that jumps around, introduces concepts that it just drops, and it pivots at random, featuring some hard at times to follow visuals. But those are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. Do you love it? Just the randomness? Do you want Tentatodd to return? Are you just happy that you now know about Tentatodd? How would you have handled a plot where Jason takes on the Nightwing mantle? Share all your thoughts down below. While you're down there, please do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it. I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.